Right. Are we due to start then?
Yeah, we're fine.
So, good morning. Welcome to Kirklees Corporate Parenting Board here in Huddersfield Town Hall on Tuesday, the 5th of March. So, membership of the board, have we any apologies?
Sorry, Chair, I've lost my list. Yes, Chair, we've got apologies from Councillor Elizabeth Reynolds, Sarah Miles, Keith Fielding, Kieran Lord and Jill Addy.
Thank you very much. If we could look at the minutes of the previous meeting, please, and any matters arising as such. On page 3, there were 4 actions that are listed as such. Where are we with certainly the first 2 about the dashboard?
I've got a presentation for later on in the meeting that will set out the example of the dashboard that's been prepared for future meetings.
Thank you very much, that's excellent. And I do understand that engagement to be held with elected members and training. Are you going to be talking about that later as well, Joe?
I will be talking on the training. The other matter that I think that refers to was for me to be invited to each political group to speak about corporate parenting in general, as well as the training. I have been to one political group. I attended the Labour group. I need to coordinate with the other parties in order to attend theirs if invited.
Thank you very much. On page 5, we noted, we asked for a breakdown of the PA data. Do we know where that is as such?
I think we reported it back on that at the previous meeting, but I can give a further if needed. I'm also going to be just talking a little bit about PA today, so...
That's fine, thank you. And on page 6, we have promotion of the corporate parenting pledge, including the possibility to be printed on officer and member ID cards. Do we know if that's any further on? Is that a work in progress?
It's a work in progress because both the Children in Care Council and the Care Leavers Forum are currently revising the pledge or promise, as I think they're likely to come out with it being called. So there's work to design the wording of the pledge first, and then we'll look at ways of promoting that across the council. Excellent,
thank you for that. I think those are the matters arising from the board, unless anybody's got anything else. Other things are going to be covered within the meeting as such. So are we happy to accept those as a true record? Yes, thank you very much. So if we could move on then, declaration of interest, just to remind colleagues, if you have any pecuniary interest that need declaring, please complete the form. Admission of the public, this meeting is held in public. Deputations and petitions, I'm assuming we have none. We have no members of the public here, so there is no public question time as such. And we're doing a slight amendment to the agenda. Item 7 is now swapping with item 10. So item 10 is the voice of children and young people and care experienced young people. And Joel's going to do that for us. Over to you, Joel.
Sorry, I'm just seeing if I can get the presentation to show on the screen. Showing it's showing on yours. Okay, I was expecting to see it up there, so you can see my presentation. Is that right? There we go. You can see it. Okay, so as agreed at previous board meetings, now we have a standing agenda item of the voice of children in Care Council and care leavers. Specifically fed into the meeting, and at the moment that's by me reporting back. I meet with the Children in Care Council and the Care Leavers Forum every week alternately. So last night I was with the Children in Care Council, the week before I was with the Care Leavers Forum. And we are developing a programme of work together with the services so that their voice is embedded within many of the things that impact and that affect their lives. So the work that we're doing in relation to the corporate parenting strategy specifically has been reviewing and considering what might be the priorities for a corporate parenting board so that they can feed in their views. And in a later presentation, I've got some feedback on the consultations and workshops that we've done with young people. They are keen, and I think at our last board meeting we gave them a wave because these meetings are currently recorded and available on YouTube, so they could see, and they did watch parts of the meeting. The feedback wasn't universally positive because it wasn't necessarily engaging them throughout, but actually making the connection and so that they understand what our role is as a board has been really valuable, and the work on the strategy that they're doing is really helpful. I'm also meeting with a smaller group of young people from those groups and other care leavers to design and deliver the corporate parenting board training, which we plan to roll out after the May elections for all elected members and officers, which I can talk about more again in a later presentation. So these just key points of activity that we've been doing with that group of young people. One of the things that I think it should have closed now, actually, I haven't seen the results, but we've had a competition to design a brand logo for the care leaving service so that actually young people feel that they've got a symbol that embolises them and that they can use for our ambassadors event, which again I'll talk about more in a later presentation. But we've got a website now launched which shows the offers that we're making to care leavers, so things like our council tax exemption. We are at the moment writing the detail of what the council's decision to recognise care experience as a protected characteristic might mean in practice. What does it really mean? So we're doing that, and again together with the children and young people's groups and having their input into those. And as the last bullet point is the training that I've mentioned. I explained to the groups that this is a two-way feedback, so if there's anything that you want to speak and to feed back to the Children and Young People's Council, then I can be that conduit until we get Children and Young People's voice on this board.
Thank you, Joel. Any questions or comments? Councillor Lawson.
Thank you, Joel. It's very interesting to hear that, and very. It was the feedback that I was going to ask you about. We hear and we include the children's voice, and what we have a version of. You said we did. How do we get the we did back to the children in a meaningful way, so that they understand and then feel as though they're fully part of the process?
At the moment, by and large, it's through my attendance at those meetings. So where we had a long conversation specifically with the Care Leaving Forum about the proposal for the council to recognise protected characteristics. Lots of questions around what that means, what the impact and effect will be, and I think a number of them have watched the full council that took place on the 7th of February, and the speakers that contributed towards that motion and it passing. And I think that that's a direct impact of they said and you did as an authority. We've talked about, and again I will come on to it in the governance conversations that we'll have later on, but we've talked about having takeover events where actually the children and young people's groups, both the Care Leavers Forum and the Children and Young People's Children in Care Council, come together and they actually provide a board where we attend. So that's a takeover event. They take over the board and they set the agenda. Periodically doing that throughout the year, even if it's once a year, is a good mechanism for demonstrating that you said we did both ways. Sometimes
we did is not very pleasant. or not very positive, that's always a difficult situation to try and explain. How difficult and how forthright can you be in that, you know, maintaining that you've got to be age appropriate and it's got to have meaning and understanding for the children's groups. So how is that sort of expressed? Is that again just your take on that?
Well, yes, I guess is the short answer. And if I understand the kind of what you're saying specifically, it's things like conversations around waiting for independent visitors, for example. They would like more access to those kind of services. There are limitations because either we can't get the volunteers or we haven't got the infrastructure to support the volunteers, and we have those conversations. I do try and steer away from burdening our young people with conversations around council limited budget, because I don't think that that's what children should have in households, and that pressure should be taken away from them. In terms of direct impact around, negative conversations around things that impact them negatively, though that's what we're doing. I've found that if you explain thoroughly the rationale and the reason for why decisions are being made, you still need to be open and honest and transparent. The young people's forums I found them to be really switched on. Actually, they're really good networks. They support each other well, and what we're moving them to is being more of a representative body for the other 600 young people that aren't in those groups as well.
Thanks very much.
I suppose that was a comment I was going to make, Joel, is that the participants that looked after Children Care Council and that Care Leavers Forum are a very, very tiny proportion. And how do we, therefore, inform the rest of that part of that population, really? I don't know if you have any plans for that.
Yep, so that was a direct conversation that we had last night with the Children in Care Council, and the week before with the Care Leavers Forum. They were redesigning. The Care Leavers Forum were redesigning their image and their own logo, and which led us on to a conversation about what is a forum. What's the difference between a forum, a council, or a union? Because in the country, care leavers groups call themselves those different things. The conversation was around the fact that it's there to represent a wider group than themselves in there. We are moving those groups from being, I think, very comfortable, and they need to be, closed groups which are almost like a club, a support group of 7 or 8 people that meet regularly and spend the evening together once a week or once a fortnight, to being a bit more mandated to go out and find the voice. So the conversation last night with the Children in Care Council followed the same vein, but was also about how can we widen out the support group, not just in terms of membership, but in terms of activity. So we talked about a programme of work including mystery shopping for services. So if we get our Care Leavers Council to turn up at the hubs, drop in, and then feed back to this group, the Corporate Parenting Board, but also to the service of their experience, that'll give a direct impact to the wider group of care leavers. Also, I'd like to explore the opportunity for advocacy and support that's provided to those groups, having a better connection to some of our wider groups, specifically children's residential, so that there's the opportunity for young people to bring groups of young people living in residential contexts together and represent those. I think they've moved from being social clubs to more representative, but I think we're still on that journey, if I'm honest.
That's good to hear. I don't expect it to happen overnight, but, that's good progress, so thank you for that. Any more questions or comments on this item? No? I could move us on then, and I'd like to welcome Michelle Rawlins, who's kindly come along. She's the head of One Adoption West Yorkshire, and she provided a report for the board. The other reports should have been sent to you as well, but for the purpose of this meeting, we wanted to focus on the Kirklees report as such, because we always run out of time, Michelle. So welcome. Can I pass over to you?
Yeah, thank you. Good morning, everybody. I'm just going to provide a summary of the activity in relation to Kirklees children and families for the first half of 23-24, so the first 6 months of the year. The activity around adoption has remained fairly stable and consistent. We had the same number of children adopted as in the same period of the previous year and the same number of children placed. We had a slight increase in the number of children who had an adoption plan made during that period, but there was a slight decrease in the number of placement orders. Sadly, we did have 2 children, a sibling group of 2 children who disrupted and returned to local authority care from their prospective adoptive placement. The majority of our children still continue to be placed with one adoption-approved adopters, which is really positive. Those are families that we know well and are local. Our numbers of early permanence in Kirklees are still quite low, and so that's something that we've been focusing on in trying to increase those numbers. We offered some training across children's social care in January, and we're about to roll out an online webinar for staff so that we can make sure we're reaching as many staff as possible around understanding early permanence and the benefits. At the half-year point, we had a slight increase in the number of children with an agency decision for adoption that were not yet matched, and that sat at 25. In terms of those children, 16 of them had a placement order, but had not yet been matched with families. Overwhelmingly, those were children from white British backgrounds, but over half of those children were part of a sibling group, and that's important to note because it's harder to find adoptive placements for children in sibling groups, and that made up the majority of the children in Kirklees with an adoption plan. In terms of those children, those 16 children, 12 had characteristics which make them more difficult to find families for. They're categorised by the Department for Education as children who are harder to place because they are in sibling groups, they're older children, or they're from ethnically diverse backgrounds or have a disability. 6 of those children had more than one of those characteristics, which impacted on the number of families available for them. For the 4 children who would not be considered more difficult to find families for, 1 had only recently received the placement order from court. We had a potential family identified for one of the other children, and the foster carers of another child had expressed an interest in adopting them, and that was being explored. We were actively family finding for the 4th child. From the children who were considered more difficult to family find for, 3 of the children had links identified. The remaining 9, there were 4 groups of sibling groups within there of 2. Family finding was on hold for one sibling group following the disruption. For another sibling group, the foster carers were being explored, and we were family finding for the other 2 groups. For the individual child, a sibling had been born, and we were exploring whether that child needed to be placed with the sibling. In terms of the 8 children adopted, there was an increase in the time it took to place them for adoption and the time it took to identify a family for them. So the A10 indicator and the A2 indicator had increased in the first half of the year. When we looked at the children that had impacted on those timescales, one was a little boy who had several complex needs, and for a long time we were exploring whether we were going to achieve adoption for him, but we did manage to achieve it. It took some time, but it was a really positive outcome and the right outcome for him, but that did impact on the time frame. As did a sibling group of 2 children who entered care and initially had a different plan away from adoption of an SGO, which wasn't successful, unfortunately. And the first family that we identified for those children that progressed quite a long way in terms of the matching process before information meant that we weren't able to proceed. And again, that impacted on the timeliness. And without those children, then we did see that the A10 was within the government time scales and there was an improvement in A2. We saw an increase in the number of families that we were supporting post-adoption in Kirklees, and we saw an increase in the number of applications to the Adoption Support Fund to provide therapeutic support to those families. The number of families, birth relatives accessing and adopted adults accessing support from PAC UK remained the same. Any questions?
Thank you very much for that. Questions or comments? Councillor Lawson.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of comments and questions, really. The first, which is about as parents, or prospective parents, go on their journey, some drop out of that journey, different reasons. People have got different personal lives and what have you. Are there any common themes that are coming through there that we can perhaps take on board as one adoption and address?
No, there are no common themes. We've done some audits of the people who've left the adoption process at different stages to try and understand if there is something we can do. And I think what we tend to see is there are a variety of reasons that people leave the process. I think we've moved away from encouraging people to leave the process and come back to us at a later stage when there are life events happen, and instead we're taking much more of an approach of pausing the process and keeping in touch with people and encouraging them then to pick up the process when they're ready. So I think we're trying to keep hold of as many people as possible that enter the process and support them with when's the right time to progress.
Great, that's good to know, and I suspected that might be the picture with such low numbers that there might not be. I was just asking the question just in case there was. And again about themes, the access to support, is there anything in that data that tells us anything about what One Adoption is doing?
Yeah, so we overwhelmingly see that people come forward for creative therapies, access to art therapies, drama therapies, and the creative therapies is a lot of the reason that people come forward. We've had a real focus in the last 12 months on encouraging people to access therapeutic support early in their adoption journey. So the majority of our families will now access therapeutic support during that first year of a child being placed, which has been really helpful in kind of scaffolding families early in their adoption journey, which hopefully means that further down the line they will come back to us for support before they reach a point of crisis, but also that they're in a stronger position in terms of building those early relationships.
Just before you go any further, we seem to have a technical issue. Could we just pause a moment, please? Councillor Lawson, you wanted to make a further question or comment?
No, just to say thank you for the answer, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michelle. I mean, the A10 indicator and the A2 indicator are always a challenge, and I know there has been work to do something with that. How do we compare? I mean, we sorry, excuse me. We're in a consortium of 5 local authorities around here. How do we stand? Is it similar in other authorities within the 5, or are we an outlier?
I think it varies from each period. I think especially when there are small numbers of children who are adopted in that time frame. 8 children is not a lot when we compare it to some of the other local authorities in West Yorkshire that have higher numbers, which will mean that their average it remains kind of fairly consistent, whereas in Kirklees it can be that one child can significantly change the A10 or the A2, which is similar in other authorities where there are lower numbers of children who are placed for adoption. So we can have really good periods where the number is low, and then it can rise significantly, and it's one child or a sibling group of 2 children that impacts on the timescales.
So yes, just to confirm really what Michelle said, in Kirklees the delay was impacted by a sibling group and a little boy with some difficulties, and because we've got such small numbers, it really does hit our performance quite significantly. So we understand what that performance is, and it is individually led. I think we're confident that the next quarter we should see an improvement in our data, but I think it's not because we're not doing anything, it's because we're dealing with really complex situations regarding children, and that really impacts on the timeliness. In other authorities such as Bradford, where they've got a much higher number of adoptions, their performance obviously is better than ours because there's more children in that cohort.
Thank you for that. Yes, and I do understand that. I suppose the positive for Kirklees is that we have less children who are looked after because we have such a high performance with special guardianship orders, and it sort of a positive actually reflects sometimes in what appears to be a negative because we have a lower number of adoptions. Have we any other comments or questions? Michelle, can I thank you so much for your report and your time today? Thank you very much. Thank you. So, ladies and gentlemen, if we can move on, please, then to item 9, which is the performance report. We have discussed this in detail in a previous meeting, and can I suggest that as we go through it, that colleagues who've got different parts of it just put any highlights in on the relevant pages, and we'll take any questions or comments as they arise. But if we can start off then with the children entering care, children care and placement stability as such. Who's doing that?
That's me, yeah. Thank you, Councillor Kendrick. Yep. Some of the detail in the performance report are going to be in the subject of the presentations to follow, so I won't overemphasise those. And given your comments around taking questions from that's been provided, what I will highlight is specifically in relation to stability. We are doing some work. Stability there meaning young people remaining in accommodated in a place for a significant period of time, if not permanently. We've undertaken some work with our multi-systemic therapy team service. They've now joined our children looked after service. They're embedded within it, and we're working together with our placement services to ensure that we can better predict where possible using both thematic analysis of when we think placements might become under pressure and challenging, but also that we can get direct information from supervising social workers for fostering services, for example, social workers visiting placements to identify where there may be difficulties and then provide the support early, and that's the key, working with our emotional wellbeing services. So we are seeking to maximise the stability of placements in that way. The other things to highlight, I think, through the report is that we do have a change in social workers, and that's another stability factor if you're a child with a relationship with a social worker, but that changes because of reasons outside of our control. Social workers do leave and retire and go on maternity leave and such. One of the things we've been doing in order to try and support when that happens is working with our Children in Care Council to develop a pen picture profile for our social workers to fill in. Something that young people have specifically asked for themselves would be, rather than cold calling and being introduced to a new adult social worker who's going to be your social worker now, is having a bit of a forerunner, a pen picture, a photo of them, a bit of a description about what their likes and dislikes are, a bit about themselves. It doesn't completely redress the balance about the fact that the social worker coming in new to a relationship with a young person will have a lot of detail on them, but it does actually give the young person a little bit of a cushion into developing that relationship. So our social workers are now developing those pen pictures as well to support that gap in stability. I won't highlight anything else other than obviously take any questions on any of the performance that's set out.
Thank you very much. I welcome the idea of pen pictures because it sort of redresses the balance, if you like, being in a relationship. Anybody got any questions or comments? No? Thank you for that. Can we move on to the children looked after reviews, visits and missings? Have we anything to highlight or comment there? No? We're okay with that? Just on the other bit, I absolutely welcome the multi-systemic therapy involvement in preventing destabilisation of placements as such. And it's one of the things we've been trying hard to protect within children's services, you know, though we've had to make some changes. We move on to education outcomes as such. Have you something you want to tell us about there?
Yeah, the main area to highlight is around attendance, and that attendance remains a key focus area for the virtual school. At the end of January, we were at 23% persistent absence. To give a bit of context around that, in 22-23 nationally, all young people, it was 22% persistent absence, and currently at the end of February, for all young people nationally, it's 21% persistent absence. The breakdown for our young people, which I promised at the start of the meeting, is that we currently rate our young people who are persistently absent as to whether or not things are significantly improving for them, and so we're seeing increased attendance and don't expect any future, predictions of persistent absence, or that absent rate will reduce, because whilst some young people will be in a position where their attendance is increasing, they will still remain persistent absence because of a percentage that they've already missed, because we are already more than a third of the way through the academic year. So despite that, though, we are seeing a number of young people who increase their attendance. So at the moment, 51% of those young people who are currently PA are seeing improved attendance, and we are not expecting them to have as many attendance concerns moving forward for the rest of the academic year. 25% we have as currently amber, where we're working with them. Things are going well, but we're just trying to stabilise those improvements. And then 24% we have as currently red, where there are concerns around the absence of those young people. Like I said, those green and amber, we can't necessarily say at this stage whether or not they will or won't leave those persistent absence statistics based on the number of days left available. A lot of the absences around illness, part-time timetables, lates, as I talked about in the last corporate parenting, suspensions and emotionally based school avoidance are the main key areas that impact on PA for children looked after.
Thank you very much for that. Any questions or comments? Can I just clarify, did you say if a young person is suspended, they automatically then go into persistent absentee data?
They won't automatically go into that data, but those days are absences. So where a young person is suspended, they're absent from school on the following days. So the suspension code for the absence is shown as an absence, as is a late. So if a young person comes into school late, as I said last time, unfortunately that is put down as a late, which is an absence for that period. So young people where they may be living further away from their school, because we try and maintain their school place to give as much consistency as possible. If then that causes late, unfortunately, that does impact on their attendance figures. We do work with schools to try and ensure that it isn't classed as an unauthorised absence, but it is still classed as an absence for that part of the day.
Yeah, certainly if they've been suspended, it's very much an authorised absence, isn't it? There we are. Okay, if we move on to looked after health, have we got any highlights you want to make, Stuart?
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to highlight some positive news in terms of the review health assessments, that we're achieving very strong compliance with our targets there, and we've managed to establish some stability in the staffing team going forward. We are still continuing to see a challenge with our initial health assessments, although the percentage achieved within the 20 days remains quite low. We're confident in the quality of the assessments that have been achieved, and that the delays are not too lengthy. We'll provide further information about those to future meetings. I also wanted to highlight the progress we're making in some of the improvements in terms of attendance at clinics, and some of the duties assigned to paediatricians to enable them to carry out more clinics.
Thank you very much. Any comments, questions? No? Okay. There's a small bit on children looked after convictions. Is there anything you want to make a comment on there?
I think all I'd like to say, of course, with regard to the looked after children with convictions, it is always a very small cohort, and so percentages can fluctuate very easily. At the moment, we are seeing an overall downturn to zero this quarter, and I think a lot of that work falls to the outer court disposal panel that we're really invested in that as a whole partnership in trying to find the best outcomes for the young people. But yeah, other than it's very low at the moment, which is incredibly positive, and we are always working with a very small cohort.
Thank you very much for that. Any comments as such? I assume, particularly, I mean, naught is very good. It's, it will obviously vary, but in reflection against the general population of young people, it must be quite a high performance, really.
Yes, certainly, and we are adopting the approach around the outer courts disposal panel for all children, not just the looked after children. So you'd like to see a representation of that performance across the board as well.
Thank you for that. Children, care leavers, have we got anything that needs to be highlighted there?
The majority of issues highlighted in the report are actually going to be the subject of the next presentation, Councillor Kendrick, so I'd propose to deal with it there if that's okay. I'll take any questions now, obviously.
Any questions for now? No? Thank you very much. Adoption, we've just had a report, and I think we've covered that as such. And that brings us to fostering. Is there anything that needs highlighting around fostering?
I think I covered quite a lot of this in the last corporate parenting board with the updated reports. I suppose one of the things I'll share is that we had a fostering diagnostic visit from the Department of Education in early February, and we're waiting for some formal feedback by the end of March. So I would welcome bringing that back to the corporate parenting board when we've received that, and that's around how we can increase our recruitment specifically of foster carers.
Thank you very much. Yes, we look forward to that, because anything that helps us increase the number of foster carers has to be most welcome. Thank you very much for that. So we'll go back to the agenda that keeps moving about a little bit. And we're now going to take item 7, which is change places with item 10, and that's the head of service update. So Joel, over to you.
Thank you, and I've got some slides to go with this. I think it says verbal update in the yeah, there it is, in the agenda. So again, as agreed, I provide an update to the board on key areas of activity done on behalf of the board, and we discussed at the last meeting for me to come back with a bit more analysis of a breakdown of children that are accommodated outside of area. So we report that in the data pack that you've just been looking at and referring to as children that are placed 20 miles or more from their home address. I've also got a short update on the protected characteristics, the motion to recognise protected characteristics for care experienced young people, and then some information on the care leavers update, which is why I didn't highlight anything in the performance report there. Again, I won't read through the slides. I'll place them there and then just talk around them if that's okay. But we talked at the last board meeting around where young people are placed outside of the authority, what the reasons and rationale for that might be, and agreed that I would look into the 80 young people that is referred to in the data pack that you've got, who are placed 20 miles away from their postcode, and look at the reason for that. I think it's important to say that there are some very good reasons, and it's in line with the plans for those young people that they live away from their postcodes in a significant number of cases. But there are there are also some young people that are placed away from the area, and we would like to bring closer back home, because actually the sufficiency of a provision of accommodation in our area isn't there. So that isn't just us, that's nationally, and the way that the placements market, as it's referred to, and we need to remember that we're talking about where children grow up and have their childhood and experience their growing up, but nationally that placements market is managed in a way that it's a mixed economy between local authorities and the private and independent sector, and that beds are sold commercially to local authorities to meet the needs of individual children, and that inevitably means that some children are placed across the country. Kirklees has a significant number of young people placed in its borders that aren't from Kirklees. Significantly more children placed in Kirklees by other local authorities than we placed outside, which is a frustration. It's been highlighted within Josh McAllister's report and review of children's social care, but it is a continuing national challenge. As well as that, there are fewer specialist provisions, placements, and accommodation arrangements for children than there are children requiring them. So getting the mix and balance right is also difficult, and again, that's a national issue. So, as I said, not all of the children that are placed outside is due to accommodation and availability in our own area. We've got 80 children, which is 30% of our overall looked after numbers at the time of doing this. And I think, as Councillor Kendrick referred to earlier on, this information is fluid. It changes on a day-by-day basis. But around 13% of the children that we look after are placed 20 miles away, which is in some cases the right thing, as I said. Looking at those young people, 58 of them are in what we call family-based care arrangements. So that's in a family setting. It could be with their own family in connected caring arrangements and kinship arrangements, or within fostering families. And the remaining young people are placed in either children's homes. We have one young person in a secure children's home, and we haven't got one locally, so they will be 20 miles away, and that's necessary for them, for example. Of those young people that aren't placed in accommodation directly in line with their plan, when looking at that group, a significant number of them are in quite large sibling groups. Actually, there's a couple of sibling groups of 4, and my analysis of that is that we were able to find carers for those young people, albeit outside of our own geographical areas, that were able to have all 4 children together, or a mother and baby together. And that means that we've got specialist provision that meets their needs, but we haven't got it here. So we've commissioned it, and we're paying for those young people to live in and away from the area, which is the next graphic. Which is, I don't know how that it's a little bit small, so apologies for that. We will work on getting this information as we to the board in a different format. But just to give you some idea, if you can see that, the orange blobs are the different geographical areas we have young people placed in. Those furthest away, I reviewed these young people last night, and those furthest away are in those arrangements because they're with family and connected carers, we have a young person and their own child placed at quite some distance, but that's the right placement for them, and they've got a local connection to there. That's in answer to the conversations around children placed away. That was the analysis that I was asked to bring back. I just pause there because there might be some questions on that particular bit.
Any questions or comments? No? I think you're good to go. Oh, yes. Put your microphone on.
Just in terms of that analysis, Joel, can you bring that to our assurance board so that we don't duplicate the ask again? Yeah.
Okay, so the next head of service update is just a note really here, and obviously elected members will know it, but for the open meeting, the council did pass a motion on the 7th of February to recognise the protected characteristics of care experience in line with a number of other local authorities. It's a really positive move and really well received and celebrated by our Children in Care and Care Leavers forums as well. It's something that they were aware of as a national campaign, so it's positive. The next step is to make that mean something without being flip. So actually, what does it mean to a care experienced young adult living in Kirklees that they've been recognised in this way? The immediate recognition is that the council will, as it does with all its other equality impact assessments, when making decisions, when making policies, when making changes, will refer to groups with protected characteristics to look specifically at the impact on those groups and to make sure that there's no negative disadvantage. The other significant part of that motion is to support the promotion and rebalance some of the narrative around negative connotations of growing up in care and being a care leaver. So we now need to lend some weight to what that means in practice and recognise protected characteristics in that way. So I'll just pause there before I come on to the Care Leaver Service Improvement Plan if there's any comments or questions on that.
Councillor Cooper.
So thanks, and there are a number of councils that have taken this up. I'm just wondering around the country how different councils are going to approach it, and is there anywhere where we're going to capture on a national basis what other people have done, so they can learn from our best practice, we can learn from their best practice, and so there's a benefit that's wider than just what we've done that might come out of this.
Yeah, that's a really good question, because there are now, I think, 79 local authorities. It might have increased this week that have recognised protected characteristics. There's a national campaigning group led by a care experienced adult campaigner, Terry Galloway, who has been really promoting this, and acts as has a online platform which measures councils by councils. Primarily, any care leaver or any person can go in there and look at their own authority and match and benchmark them across to see whether and what the differences are. So things that we do. So we provide council tax relief for care leavers up to the age of 25. You can see which other councils do that, and conversely, you can see which other councils don't. As the development of protected characteristics becomes a bit more explored by authorities to see what it does mean, because I suppose that the initial notion of it was to recognise that care experience is given the same status under the Equalities Act as other protected characteristics. Actually, councils aren't at will to do that. It's an act of parliament, and it has a national legislative impact. So councils recognising it is twofold. I understand through the campaign. One, to put weight on national government to actually move on that issue that was a recommendation in Josh McAllister's review to recognise those characteristics, but also to see how it can use its influence locally. So there's a national leaving care benchmarking forum that will be working to benchmark what different councils are doing to implement the meaning of that. By and large, my understanding, I haven't looked at all 78 or whatever it is councils, but the ones that I've been in touch with and seen are bringing together, through their corporate parenting arrangements, all-party support from the council to raise the profile of care leavers' needs within the area, and that means extending support out through businesses, through our SMEs locally, and promoting the needs and disadvantage of care leavers. And the services, care leaving services, are providing counsellors with information and resources in order to feed those conversations. So just things like short and simple analysis of care leaver outcomes in your local area. What's our overrepresentation of care leavers that are homeless or in prison or accessing services, and how can we use that information to spin it with services?
Can I just make a comment? I mean, it's great formally recognising being in the care system has barriers, and your bullet point you said about the needs of care experienced young people be central to all council decision making. I think the trick for us is to make sure it isn't a tick box exercise, and that we're very proactive in really questioning what the impact will be on care leavers. I know it's an added pressure on people who are busy and doing reports and all the rest of it, but it is important we get this right. Thank you. Do you want to continue on, Joel, a bit more?
Yep. So the next part of the update was just really in relation to the care leavers service and our improvement plan, and just to bring to the board for awareness that we are doing a significant amount of work with our care leaving service. We've had a lot of support in terms of our review. So we've done our own self-assessment and self-review. We've had internal audits supporting the work to look at how we deliver our care leaving services. But we've also had Mark Riddell, who's the National Implementation Lead on Care Leaving Services for Government, come and do a 2-day review of our services and give us feedback, which has been right the way through our executive leadership team for sponsorship and endorsement. And that's necessary because it recognises that actually care leaving services, although we talk about them under our corporate parenting umbrella, aren't just in the gift of children's services. We're talking about young adults. By and large, it's a permissive service. It needs to be addressing and benefiting young adults, and therefore we need adult services, housing services, other partners that work and protect adults, vulnerable adults, to come together. So using the full resource of the council to do that is really important. We've got, as well as those things that I've highlighted there in terms of our strategic drive to improve services, we've also got a very detailed improvement plan for the care leaving service. We have got some significant strengths in there, and we've developed a model using the hubs which we're building on. So we've got two sites that are owned and purposed for care leavers to use and drop in, and they do. So we've got showers in there, we've got washing machine facilities, kitchens in there, we can do cooking, learning, home learning skills, all those kind of things. And we are increasing the use of those. So as well as those very positive things, we also know where we've got to improve things specifically. So we're doing a lot of work with the Children Looked After team in preparation for becoming a care leaver, because it starts early, and our children leave care more, at an earlier age than children growing up in other households, and it's really significant that if you're going to leave a foster caring arrangement where you might have been hopefully for a number of years, very settled, but you are going to leave that at 18. Many young people, the average age, according to the Office of National Statistics, for leaving home at the moment is 26. So actually on that basis, our young people need extra support and preparation, and we need to be able to build that in. That comes in the form of planning really closely with the young person through what's called a pathway plan, and we know we've got work to do on that. So we're working really closely with North Yorkshire to improve the quality of our pathway plans and the meaning and meaningfulness of our pathway plans to children and young people. I think just using that comment that Councillor Kendrick just said, to make sure that what we're not doing is ticking a box to say that we've got one done in time, but actually that it means something to the young person person, it meets their goals, their aspirations and dreams. Because at the point that a young person becomes an adult, if we're not attractive to offering those services, they will leave us and they will not stay in contact with us. And actually the outcomes are proven to be less good. So those are the emphasis of that work. We know, as I mentioned there, it's not these are young adults, and we need a broader workforce to support young adults in success than just children's services. So we've got this week, actually Thursday this week, we've arranged our first ambassadors event. It's a call-in of organisations and services. We've invited around, I think in the end we invited around 40 different organisations and partners to come and join us. We've got a mixed response, but it's the first one. So we've got, it's being hosted by Kirklees College, so we're working in partnership with them, which is great. They're providing the venue, they're providing the refreshments. We've got a national speaker, a speaker of national acclaim, Andy Brearley. He's really, he's local to us. He's a West Yorkshire guy. I've worked with him really closely, and he's a very powerful speaker because he can speak from his personal lived experience as well. He spent a lot of his childhood in care and in the criminal justice system and in substance misuse services, and is now a very successful academic working at Leeds Trinity College in researching and doing a lot of work with care leavers. So we've engaged him to try and help us develop our community of support for care experienced young people that we work with. And that's the head of service update. I'll not take the slide off because it goes into the next agenda item, which is why we mix the agenda up.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? Councillor Lawson.
Just a quick question, and possibly not directly related to the report, unfortunately, but when we talk about care experienced people who an accommodation and housing, if we have a young person who's been at university, for example, when they're mid-term, how do we address that? How do we help there? Could you just sort of go into that for me a little?
The starting point is it's a real challenge because some of those young people have left very stable and supported fostering arrangements and aren't able to go back because those foster carers are still foster carers and caring for other young people in those households, and there isn't room for them. There's also challenges with regards to the arrangements for care leavers. There is the ability to have what's called a staying put arrangement in place, and that's where young people stay within the household. But those aren't very manageable when a young person might go off for terms at a time and then come back. Because it's the households need to function, and often, although we would say that fostering income the household shouldn't be dependent on fostering income, actually many people foster because actually it supports them maintain a household and a family, including the foster child. But when the foster child's not there, they're not able to maintain that household, so they seek another foster placement. So it's a really good question because it is a really good it's a really significant national challenge. We are working with housing providers to try and put in place accommodation both for training flats and for accommodation for young people to return to. But at the moment, young people returning would often stay in halls, and many universities provide support for care leavers who stay away and because they haven't got family to return to. Some of our care leavers obviously will return back to their families as well during outside of term time, and it's a mixed bag. But our PAs would work and support with young people on an individual basis.
Yeah, no further questions. I'm just really glad that we have it in view, because you're right, it is a national problem, and it's a very mixed problem. It's I'm calling it a problem. It's a very mixed individual experience, and shouldn't really be a barrier to a university experience or a further education residential experience. So I'm very glad that you've told me what you've told me, and I'd be interested in any kind of programs or research or improvements that we do in those lines. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Cooper.
In the same vein, just wondering if we have any contact with sort of student welfare organisations to sort of say, we're the parents, keep an eye on them, let us know if there's any issues, those sort of things. Is that done as a matter of course, or is it done on a sort of individual basis?
It's done on an individual basis with the personal advisor and the care leaver that they're supporting, but the infrastructure's a lot better than it used to be. Universities and further education, higher education establishments are a lot better at recognising and supporting care leavers than identifying that. So we've got at the event on Thursday this week, Huddersfield University and Kirklees College are both attending, and both very much support the work that we're doing. Huddersfield University, interestingly, will have a number of care leavers that aren't our care leavers, but from other authorities, and they provide support. And we're looking at how we can work together so that those care leavers in our area can still receive support from care leaving services, trying to get that universality of the offer for care leavers wherever they might be. There's obviously some challenges with that in terms of resources and our responsibilities and our powers and responsibilities. We saw some of that on our Christmas meal. Actually, we had some care leavers who aren't Kirklees care leavers, but living in Kirklees because that's where they've been placed or where their accommodation is, came to our Christmas dinner event, and we supported them as we would any other care experience. And the same is true in those education institutions.
Thank you. Can I just make a comment? And I mean, it looks like there's some real work happening about this, and you commented that some students stayed at university because they haven't a home to come back to, which is great if that's an actual choice, but it isn't the norm. And we celebrate every time we have care leavers get university places, but it does put them in a difficult situation. And there is that to-ing and fro-ing, isn't it? There are care leavers who are here at Huddersfield University who might want to go back to their home area during the breaks. And we've got Kirklees young people elsewhere who might want to come back to Kirklees. And you just wonder if there's something that could be done about the sort of accommodation that's available as such. I don't know. But, it's a piece of work that needs to continue. It is important. Have you anything further on this item? Thank you very much for that.
Oh, hello. Councillor Kendrick.
Oh, sorry. Yes, please.
Sorry. So I manage the independent reviewing officers for Children Looked After, and just building on what Joel was saying in relation to planning and pathway planning, part of our role is to review the pathway plans for them. And I think we very much have wanting to focus on making those documents, making that come alive, making something more that young people can fully invest in as well. So just to say, linking in with the work around care leavers, we had a recent practice learning day for my staff, looking at auditing some of the review meetings that we've done and what the documents look like. But we also invited Lauren Stevenson and some of the PAs and team managers from her. So we had that shared understanding discussion of what the key knowledge skills that personal advisors have as well that they can add to, but also how we make sure that works alongside the social workers as well, because how things are planned in Kirklees is from 17 years old. All children and young people should have both a social worker and a personal advisor. And what we were thinking about how we can make improvements in that, who's the best person to liaise and speak with the young person, but also when we have the regular reviews, how we can make sure everyone's inputting into those, but then we get to focus on what the next steps that the young person really wants to do, but then particularly how we can start preparing for the point that Joel talked about when young people become 18. It shouldn't just be that point where everything disappears. There should have been, those plans are in place. So, 6 months, 3 months beforehand, we're all looking at what still needs to happen, who's the best person to do that. So that's really important. And from our work as independent reviewing officers, the next step for us is meeting and talking with the children looked after social work teams as well to join that together. So we recognise it's such an important challenge at the moment, and yeah, the focus on care leavers has really helped. I think everybody working with young people up to 18 that it's part of it's a key part of their journey. It's and our work shouldn't be ending there. We should just be preparing the way for the next stage for them. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. It's reassuring because it is like dropping off the edge of a cliff if we don't do that proper planning and support for our young people who are 18 plus. I noticed Joel's already got up the head page for the next item, which is the Corporate Parenting Board Strategy, an initial update on the review. Joel.
Yeah, and sorry if this feels a little bit death by PowerPoint. It would have been worse without the slides from my perspective because it's a verbal update. This substantive agenda item it links into previous conversations that I know that the board have had, which included our comments from our chief executive for the authority around how the board might function. I'm providing an update here on 3 specific areas of work, which are the required revision of our corporate parenting strategy, because it expires this year. And so we're working on that, and I have been working on that with the Children Care Council and the Care Leavers Forum to consider what our priorities might be for the next 3 years, and that would therefore steer the focus of this board in terms of overseeing and scrutinising and driving that work and delivering that work as well, which is the next part, which is how they reconfiguring the board arrangements to better do that in terms of a broader membership really, and then to make sure that we've got officers and partners acknowledging that it isn't all for the council and it isn't all for children's services within the council to do, are the 3 areas of work that I've mapped out in this overview. So the first slide here is really setting out in example what the priorities for the corporate parenting board might be set out in our strategy. Now they're not dissimilar, they're kind of usual suspects. Specifically working with the children and young people, we looked at actually something in there around the board recognising that children need fun activities, they need enrichment, they need engagement. So yes, we want to monitor education, health, attainment, engagement in school and those things, and make sure that they've got somewhere stable and safe to live. Those are the board's requirements, but actually also recognising that the board has a responsibility to ensure that children have childhoods as well. So these are the priorities that we've discussed with those. I'm not asking this board to say and confirm that they're set, but it's just a sense of that's the types of priorities that we're looking forward to. And as I give the board in the near future a draft strategy, that's how we will be shaping the strategy around key priorities. In terms of reconfiguring our board to drive those strategies, we've already begun actually to invite extended membership in. And this is based on what we know is good practice. So referring back to comments that were made earlier about how do we benchmark and compare with other authorities about what they're doing, learn from best practice and replicate where we can. Actually having a board that has a broader membership of decision makers and resource allocators on it, we think that we'd be in a better place to have conversations around changing processes that are outside of this board's control under its current constitution and membership. So we've written out through the chair to West Yorkshire Police, and we've had a response from the district commander to say that he'd be very interested in engaging with the board and attending and taking up a role. So things like preventing overrepresentation of care leavers and the impact of the criminal justice system on children in care. Well, you couldn't really have a more significant member of your board to be able to affect change in that area, for example. We're doing the same with health commissioners, so that we can actually say if we have difficulty and challenges within our service delivery around health, actually we need commissioners here to say, what are we going to do about that then? What are you going to do about that in terms of the needs of people within your area? So that's a key invite. The probation service have recognised a specific organisation to support care leavers. It will be a challenge. It is nationally a challenge because the way that the probation services were disaggregated some years ago has left them still recovering, I think, in many respects. But they are now a national organisation rather than local trusts, and therefore they have to respond through the civil service, and that's harder. But nevertheless, we're asking the probation service have representation and a seat at the board. And then others. Significantly, though, our Children in Care Council and Care Leavers Forum have asked to be included within the board arrangements. That's not going to be a quick fix, but it's something that the board needs to think about how we might manage that, whether that's through takeover events, whether that's through a confirmed seat, whether that means that we alter the time and the forum and the arrangements for publicity on this board, all of which we're having conversations with the chair around how we navigate that within the constitution. So reconfiguring the board is part of the strategy. And then in terms of driving the strategy, obviously that falls to officers and partners to deliver. And what we're wanting to do, I think this links in very much to what our conversations that we've had with our chief executive are around ensuring that we're using the time and energy and commitment of members of this board to focus on the detail of what's actually happening and what can we do to change it, rather than just headline reports and performance. So effectively devolving scrutiny to scrutiny, but using this board less as that vehicle and more of a receiving the detailed reports about how and what impact does it make and what can we do in order to make that impact even greater. So in order to do that, I said that in a previous agenda item talked about, in the minutes from the last meeting, we mentioned dashboards, and these are mock dashboards. The data's not real in it, and it might be very difficult to see, but these are the types of dashboards that we've used are used for corporate parenting boards around the country, which provide headline information, and then we can choose as a board what we want a full in-depth report on. So you can see there, well, if you can see there, the geographical mix of this mock local authorities placements at distance, the age bands of young people that they have, and the groups and periods of time in care. Similarly, you can see there the number of young people that have got registered disabilities that are in care, the number of young people that are living in family arrangements. It makes it's a smarter look. I do recognise that these would bear better scrutiny if you had them in paper to look at, and this mock data's based on a significantly larger cohort than our own. And then one for care leavers, providing similar reports. So the proposal was that we move to a infographic-based data, much like that you've just seen actually in the one adoption report, and as these, and more in-depth reports to the board on impact and inquiry. In terms of the delivery arrangements, within the strategy, each of those, whatever the agreed priorities are, if it were to be those 6 priorities, as however they're worded, would all be framed for the groups leading them to set out what the vision and the outcome of that proposed priority is, what the challenge is in it, so where the performance is at the moment, what do we need to do in order to better that challenge, and what we will do to better that challenge, and then what the success looks like, the outcomes. And those would be reports in to the board on each of the priorities specifically at each board meeting. And again, I've tried to describe that in a graph to show how we would manage the governance of the board if we move to these structures, which is having a corporate parenting board which has direct links with the children in care forums, whether that's as members or through the conduit. At the moment, that's the conduit with me feeding back. We've got good links with children's scrutiny being present at the board as well, which is helpful because there's also items that might come through that route to be picked up and explored more with the corporate parenting board. The operational group is partners delivering our strategy and then the priorities, whatever they might be. I presuppose them as the 6 but that we've discussed with the children and young people. Those are the governance arrangements as proposed. In simpler terms, we've got a governance board which oversees, challenges and supports the work of the board, and a delivery group reporting into the board that is responsible for pulling that information together and driving business. And that's it.
Thank you for that, Joel. That's quite a lot of information to consume and absorb at the moment, and I think we probably need a bit of time to reflect on it. Can I ask, will your slides be circulated to all board members, please?
Yes, absolutely.
Fine, thank you. Anybody got any current comments? I suppose for me it's, and I sort of get the governance of corporate parenting. For me it is really as a cabinet member as to how I'm reassured in some detail, which currently this board does that for me. I think that has to be found in a different way. It can't just be left to scrutiny. Much as I admire children's scrutiny, it'd be a bit ridiculous if I'm the one who doesn't know. And I'm not sure how that works. We need to figure that out, perhaps. But perhaps that's a discussion we can bring back next time to look in some detail. And I assume you'll have some more information by then, Joel, as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the first part of that, Councillor Kendrick, is to provide the draft strategy, so which will include the governance arrangements. I think that the board would under that structure would receive more information and detail than less. It's not proposing to lose the current level.
Yeah, I can see that you've been looking at co-production with children and young people who are looked after and care leavers, but there are other players in this field as well, like our foster carers and what have you, and how they are included in that sort of co-production and have that right of say. And that's just off the top of my head. I am sure there are some other players in this that we need to make sure are included. Okay, thank you for that. That takes a deal of thinking about and looking at, does that? Well, we're running out of board members because there have been lots of meetings today and people have been gradually leaving, but that busy people, that has to be supported and admired. Item 12 is update from board members on interactions with services. Anybody got anything to say or report? I have a little list, I'll have a go at those. So I attended the Mockingbird third installation event, which was really good, and there was a lot of really good cake there. But the positive connection for me was that the foster carer families who were there in the room, who were already networking together and feeling mutual support as well as support from the hub, you know, which is really positive, and I'm absolutely pleased to see that. The other week I met with the Fostering Network Board, and that was particularly, they'd invited third sector leaders along, and that was particularly looking at opportunities for volunteering for our looked after young people, opportunities for training and experience as such, and they're working on that, and I think that's a real positive going forward, and will feed into the care leaver stuff if you've already had that environment of doing some volunteering, work placement as a younger person. it will build on that as such. I met with, there are more ambassadors than hot dinners, the young ambassadors, which is the Kirklees Youth Alliance's young ambassadors. I met them in a wood in Homley. That was really interesting to hear what their views are and answer a lot of questions quite badly about what councillors do, etc. But there we are. That was a useful experience. I met last week with Karen Jackson, the chief exec of Locala, who was reporting back how they were feeling very involved and much more content with the thriving contract, which is a big plus. And I also, at that point at which I've confessed to you, Joel, said they were likely to get a letter about corporate parenting, and she was very welcoming of that and looking forward to that. Councillor Reynolds and I have done one session, and I've got another session fixed in the diary with Councillor Paul Moore, who was a new member of Children's Scrutiny. He's very keen to understand what Children's Service is about, so we did an hour-long briefing session with him the other week, and we have another one coming up. And I also met with Councillor Moore and took him to number 12, as you well know, Joel, last week, because he wanted to know about the drop-in services for care leavers. So I think you've got a very good member of scrutiny there, Councillor Cooper. I chaired the Yorkshire and Humber Leave Member Network 2 weeks ago, I think it was, and that was a really stimulating and good meeting. It was focusing very much on SEND, on special educational needs, and we had a presentation by somebody from the LGA, which was useful. I've attended the RIIA Leave Member Sounding Board, which again focuses on SEND as such. And I was involved at the front door health check setup meeting. Unfortunately, I couldn't go to the feedback meeting because it clashed with Cabinet as such, but that was, I understand, a positive response from that, help us to move forward. And that's about it as such as what I've been doing in the last few weeks. Corporate Parenting Board agenda plan, I think at the moment there are fairly standard things. If people could have a look, if there are anything, I mean, an obvious thing to start being included in future meetings is the strategy that you've been talking about that needs to come in as such. In April, we've got residential homes overview, and again, the voice of children, young people, care experienced young people, and an ambition board update and virtual school governing body update. I'm assuming there'll have been one in between, will there?
We're hoping so.
Right, because if there hasn't, that needs to come off there. If the strategy perhaps will be a key part of that April, is that going to fit the timescales, Joel?
Yes, I think so.
Yeah. Anything else anybody feels we should have on the April meeting as such? No? Are we happy with that? We'll have a look and see whether what other outstanding things need to come forward. There are sometimes some annual reports that have to come as part of the regulation, like fostering annual reports.
Yeah, there'll be the fostering annual report and then an update on the diagnostic visit as well, but I think maybe May might be more appropriate for those times.
Okay, but we'll have that conversation with you and just check on timeliness of that. So, ladies and gentlemen, I think we are at the end of today's meeting. Can I thank everybody for their contributions, for all those people who brought reports as well and commented. Thank you very much. The meeting now has come to an end. Thank you.